IELTS speaking advice. Hello, my name is Andrew from Crown Academy of English, and I'm an English teacher. In this video, I will give you 6 valuable tips for the IELTS speaking exam. And I will give you a special bonus. So at the end of the video, I explain how to get my free IELTS guide. Okay, so make sure you watch all of the video right to the end and then download my free IELTS guide. So let's start. Here are 2 tricks to give yourself time to think, and this is valid for parts 1 and 3 of the IELTS exam. So in parts 1 and 3, the examiner will ask you a question and expect you to immediately start speaking. So you do not have time to prepare. Example, this is a part 1 question. The examiner asks you, what snacks are popular in your country? And as soon as he finishes the question, he expects you to start speaking. So here are 2 techniques, 2 tricks to give you some time. So number 1, reformulate the question slowly. So this means that you ask the question again, you repeat the question back to the examiner from your point of view. Example, what snacks are popular in my country? Let me think. Well, the most popular snack in my country is probably crisps, followed by... So in red, this is reformulating the question. So notice that you've changed the pronoun from your to my. So it's from your point of view. So you say this slowly, then you say, let me think. So in red, this gives you more time to think about your main answer. And your main answer is here. So with this technique, you will probably gain about 20 seconds, which is a lot. Second, you can comment on the question. Example, that's an interesting question. Or, that's a good question. I'm not certain, but I would guess that crisps are the most popular snack, followed by... Or, that's a tricky question. I'm not 100% sure, but I would imagine that crisps are the most popular snack, followed by... So again, in red, these are all techniques to give you some time to think about your main answer. And you will not lose marks for doing this. Okay, this is how native English speakers speak. This is quite natural. But you will lose marks if you say nothing. So if you stay silent for 20 seconds while thinking, then that is not good, because that is not fluent. Okay, so these are some useful techniques. Tip number 2, it's a speaking test. You must speak. Now, I'm sorry if this sounds obvious, but many students give 1 or 2 word answers. So the advice is, if you know the subject well, develop your answers. Do not give 1 or 2 word answers. This is probably the worst thing that you can do. So if you know the subject, if you are able to give a long answer, then do it. For part 1, The examiner has a fixed list of questions. He or she cannot ask you more questions if you do not speak enough. So in part 1, if the examiner has maybe 5 questions, if you only give 1 or 2 word answers to those 5 questions, then that's it. Part 1 is finished. He will not ask you any more questions, and you will get a very low band. Remember, the speaking test has 4 criteria: fluency, vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. If you only give 1 or 2 word answers, you will score a very low band. Okay, you will not score more than band 5, probably lower. So here is an example of a question. This is a part 1 question. What kind of accommodation do you live in? A flat. This is an absolutely terrible answer. This is a question you can prepare for. This is a question you know something about. Okay, you must obviously know the subject well. You know where you live. So this is an absolutely terrible answer. Here is a good answer. I live in a 2-bedroom flat in the outskirts of Madrid. It's on the 3rd floor of a 5-story block of flats. So here is a long, developed answer. You're showing good vocabulary, good grammar, and hopefully good pronunciation and fluency. This is an answer that would give you a high band. A question like this is an excellent opportunity to give a long answer, but you must take that opportunity. Give shorter answers only when you do not know the subject well. Okay, so do not try to bluff. So do not try to give a long developed answer to a question that you know little about. Do not bluff something that you do not know anything about. Why? Well, several reasons. Your vocabulary will not be good. Okay? If you do not know a subject, then you do not know the vocabulary, and you will lose marks. Also, you will be pausing and hesitating a lot because you are thinking and you are panicking and you are lying and you are bluffing, and all of that will result in an incoherent answer and poor fluency. So you will lose marks and you will get a low band. So don't bluff. If you do not know a subject, then it is better to give a shorter answer. Remember the criteria: fluency and coherence, vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. Okay? So the advice here is be brief and very concise for questions you know little about. Okay? Can I ask the examiner questions? Well, it depends on the part of the test. In part 1, you may ask the examiner to repeat the question. Example, you can say, "I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?" But part 1, this is the only question you can ask. You can only ask him or her to repeat the question. You cannot ask any other questions. You cannot ask him to explain the question. You cannot ask to explain vocabulary. This is the only question that you can ask. Part 2, no. No questions. You may not ask the examiner any questions. You may not ask the examiner what a word means. You may not ask the examiner for a different topic. And the examiner will tell you when to start and stop. It is not necessary to ask. So part 2, it's a big no. Part 3 is different. Part 3, it's a big yes. Approved. You may ask questions. It's a discussion. So you may ask the examiner to repeat the question. Again, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please? Also, you may ask the examiner to clarify or explain the question. If you don't understand the question, you may ask. Example: I'm not sure that I have understood the question. Could you explain, please? Or, what do you mean exactly? Those are perfectly good questions. Also, you may even ask the examiner to explain a word. Could you tell me what XXX means, please? And obviously you replace XXX with the word that you do not understand. I'm not familiar with XXX. Could you please tell me what it means? Okay, so these are the 3 types of questions that you may ask in part 3. Okay, you may ask them to repeat the question, to explain the question, or to explain a word. But no other questions are allowed. Do not ask the examiner for his opinion. Do not ask him to ask you another question or to change the topic. Okay? Will I lose marks if I ask the examiner to repeat a question in part 1 and 3, or to explain a word or question in part 3? The answer is no. You will not lose marks. This is a speaking exam. It is not a comprehension exam. So the speaking test is not testing your understanding. This is not the listening test. We are only testing your speaking. Therefore, you are allowed to ask questions according to the rules I have already explained, without losing any marks. So yes, it is okay to ask questions, and you will not lose marks. Okay? Recently, I interviewed a student who scored a band 8 in the IELTS exam, and I have written a full detailed report from that interview. The report contains how to prepare for the IELTS, tips and advice, and reviews of the best IELTS resources. So if you are preparing for the IELTS exam and you want a high band, I strongly recommend that you read this report. So to download it for free, then you can click here on the screen.